So the types of problems that we end up solving for people are, a lot of times people start off with a platform where you upload your content and everything is kind of handled for you. And then you kind of run into different, limitations, whether that's, it doesn't look the way you want it to look, or you want to do things so that people consume your content better, get better results, that kind of thing. And they realize, okay, this tool is great. It was really easy to get set up with, but I want to do more. How can I be more flexible in my delivery? So that tends to be where AccessAlly really shines, because it's a WordPress plugin. You can also use different themes to make it look pretty. We have our own theme as well. So if people want to get started quickly, it looks good out of the box. But yeah, so we tend to solve those kind of complicated, I want to send a specific email at a specific time. I want to give people points for completing things. There's different ways you can do things like that.
It is time for Build That Podcast, where we will discuss how you can use a podcast to grow your business and expand your influence. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford. Let me encourage you to sign up for the 200 words to move you forward with marketing and podcasting, delivered right to your inbox each Tuesday. Sign up for it at buildthatpodcast.com/the 200. I'll also put it in the show notes. Now, let's jump into today's episode. And I'm excited today because I have with me Nathalie Lussier. She is the founder of AccessAlly, which helps online businesses scale through courses, group coaching, and memberships. She's also an award-winning entrepreneur and software engineer who's been making websites since she was 12 years old, and she has helped thousands of people all over the world and has been featured in places like Forbes, Fast Company, Success Magazine, and Venture Beat. Nathalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. I'm excited.
Oh, me too. I was so glad we could connect through LinkedIn and just had some conversations about content and podcasts. So I was thrilled you accepted.
Yay. I know we're going to have a great conversation.
It will be. Now, before we get into just some of the fabulous things you're doing with AccessAlly, because you really are doing some tremendous work there, how does a programmer and SaaS entrepreneur get into permaculture? Because I know that is part of your story too. And I was just wondering how that connected.
Yeah, so I grew up in the countryside, but I did not grow up on a farm by any means. And, I went off to live in the city. I lived in Toronto and New York City. And we decided, my husband and I, we wanted to move to the countryside before we started our family. And we kind of got the gardening bug when we were in the countryside. And I really feel like once you find out about permaculture, which is this concept of permanent agriculture or kind of regenerative agriculture, it's like it gets you and you can't get it out of your system. And then we kind of, went all the way down the rabbit hole and decided to move to a farm after that. And yeah, now we have ducks, chickens, sheep, and all kinds of trees and animals and plants that we're growing. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And I think it really balances out our software and tech side to be outside more and, planting trees or vegetables and moving our animals on a regular basis and all of that. So yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily related, but I think the two feed each other very well.
No, and that makes sense because I know if I am sitting at a desk for too long, for too many hours, if I don't go run, if I'm not doing some physical things, it just wears me down even more. And so having that offset, it just makes a huge difference. Plus, it sounds like you're doing just some fun stuff. For lack of a better, I'm sure that's one of those big marketing descriptive terms, just fun stuff. So no, it's great. So you're on the farm, you're enjoying some rural life, and that's going to be ongoing for a while, it sounds like.
Yes. And I think what I like about it is that it's almost like business, right? Because there's so much to learn and new things to explore and test and see if it's going to work here. So we have, this greenhouse, and we ended up building something called a climate battery, where it basically cycles hot air from the greenhouse underground, stores it, and then at night it releases the hot air back into the top so it stays warmer in the winter. And so, yeah, these are like systems and, sort of engineering type things that maybe you would do in product development in a company, but we're doing them kind of on the farm side. And yeah, that's been kind of fun to experiment with too.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love that. And I can definitely see the overlap then from a systematic level. So let's then just kind of transition into AccessAlly. So what is AccessAlly and what kind of problems are you solving with it?
Yeah, so it's a WordPress plugin, and originally we built it for ourselves in a quick weekend, mainly because the plugin that we were using at the time to run our courses and our online challenges, it was causing issues, and basically our website host was shutting down our website. So because I have a degree in software engineering, my husband is a great developer, we were like, hey, let's just build our own real quick to solve this problem. And so at first it was just basically gated content. That's all it did. And since then, it's really grown into, a full-fledged payment processor. Now it handles everything from, managing your members and releasing content, drip content, doing courses and gamification. And we just rolled out a community tier as well. So if you want to have forums and groups and things like that. So it's really grown a lot. It's been 8 years since we did that first version. And yeah, it's amazing. So the types of problems that we end up solving for people are, a lot of times people start off with a platform where you upload your content and everything is kind of handled for you. And then you kind of run into different, limitations, whether that's, it doesn't look the way you want it to look, or you want to do things so that people consume your content better, get better results, that kind of thing. And they realize, okay, this tool is great. It was really easy to get set up with, but I want to do more. How can I be more flexible in my delivery? So that tends to be where AccessAlly really shines, because it's a WordPress plugin. You can also use different themes to make it look pretty. We have our own theme as well. So if people want to get started quickly, it looks good out of the box. But yeah, so we tend to solve those kind of complicated, I want to send a specific email at a specific time. I want to give people points for completing things. There's different ways you can do things like that.
It is the customization that's fascinating. And I've run into that on my own, just in other aspects. Sometimes out of the box and simple is great, but there are times when you just wish you could just do 3 other things with it. So I appreciate that. And as you're in the marketplace, because if for everybody listening, we'll talk about the website here in a bit, but they have just a tremendous comparison page where you guys compare AccessAlly. I just ballparked it to like over 30 online course platforms. I just sort of looked at the page and thought there's a lot, and it looked at least 30-ish. Things like Kajabi, Teachable, Thinkific. What's a business need to think about if they're launching a course? Because I know those names like Kajabi, Teachable, Thinkific, those get bandied about. Those are out in the marketplace, but so is AccessAlly. And so what do people need to consider when they're looking for a platform?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of considerations, and that's why it's great that there are so many options. So some people may be a do-it-yourself kind of person, and maybe they're also not that technical, and they want something really easy out of the box, kind of what I was talking about. You just upload your stuff and you're good to go. And so sometimes those kind of Teachable, Thinkific type options are really great. They don't necessarily have the flexibility, but at least you can get up and running. So what I like to recommend is, if you haven't sold your course yet and you haven't made money, those are great, because you can usually have a cheaper plan to start with, and just make sure that your idea is going to sell, right? So that you're not spending tons of time and customizing and making everything beautiful, but then nobody wants what you built. So that would be something to think about. And then the other thing is also thinking about it long term. So one of the things that we see a lot is people, they get into a platform and it's good, but then they kind of see themselves in like 5 years or even 3 years, like what would that look like? And so a lot of times what we found is that people want to sell their courses not just to individuals, but also to groups or to organizations or teams. And a lot of these other platforms don't have that functionality. So if you know that's kind of soon on the horizon and that's kind of the target audience that you have, that I would say something like AccessAlly is really good for that, because it has that team functionality. But then also, just thinking about, what matters to you, right? Is it being able to do exactly what you want, the way that you want it? Is it, some people really like that WordPress plugin is something that they can back up, they can change servers, they own all their content. Sometimes platforms, you're kind of building on rented land, essentially, where if they change their pricing or, there's things that they can happen that might feel like, oh, like my landlord is not being very nice to me, right? So those can be a little bit trickier kind of situations. But with a WordPress plugin, you can always switch plugins, or, your content is on your own website. So you're never stuck stuck in another platform. So that's also something to think about too. But yeah, there's a lot of consideration. Obviously, pricing kind of comes in too. So some people end up wanting to hire a developer or a designer. So that's something to consider as well. With a lot of the other platforms, maybe you don't need a designer just because you use a template. With AccessAlly, we have a free theme, so you could definitely start with that. But if you want to, over time, improve the look and feel and just make it a little bit fancier, you can always hire someone for doing some of that work too.
Excellent. There's like 2 points just to kind of circle back on. One, you talked about the difference between like an individual and a group or a team. From a class perspective with with AccessAlly, what's the difference between those? What's that look like?
Yeah. So, most people, when they're selling a course or a membership, each person signs up on their own and then they have their own experience going through the course content. And if you want to sell to an organization or a group, let's say company ABC wants to train 10 people on their team on sales. So they'll sign up for your sales training and one person will purchase 10 seats. And then that sort of team leader will assign or invite all the people on their team to join the members area. And then they can go through the course at their own pace, but then the person who invited them can also see their progress, maybe get in touch with them and see like, hey, how's it going with the sales training? It looks like you got stuck in module 2, that kind of stuff. So that can also help facilitate the training sometimes and make sure that actually people go through it and get the results that they're hoping for. And so, yeah, it makes it really easy to manage team members. You could add people, remove people, get more seats if you want to. So it's very flexible in that way too.
Wow, I really like that option because I know just from my experience, and a lot of times you want a group to go through a training program to be able to take some material together, especially if you're at a corporate setting, even your corporate training. But yeah, all of those things, it's amazing how often a group option would come in handy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen people in different industries. We have people who are doing, like you said, more corporate stuff. We have people that are doing skilled trades type training, all kinds of different areas. And yeah, there's just so much flexibility. And then the reporting part is really helpful too, so that you can actually, see what's happening in the groups.
So that reporting part, is that like a dashboard? Is that like an Excel sheet that gets emailed to you like once a day or once a week? What's that look like?
It is a dashboard, and the cool thing is you can design the dashboard. So as the site owner, you decide what they get to have on their dashboard. So you could show quiz results, you could show progress, on each page or each module, however high level or nitty gritty you want to get on some of those. And then you can also have private notes. So, obviously most companies probably have email so they can get in touch with each other, but we can also have notes that are directly within the members area. So if somebody has a question or, they want to update the admin on something, that's also something that can be done within that area too.
Wow. That sounds amazing, that it's customizable, easy to use, out of the box, and gives you the option to be able to see the details from your class and to see how things are moving along. Because I think that's sometimes too, I know if I were to create a class to sell and I want to see if people are actually making through, if they're getting stuck somewhere, if they're losing interest. So it sounds like pretty incredible visibility.
Absolutely. And then we also connect or integrate with other email marketing platforms. So AccessAlly has its own built-in emails. So you could do certain things like, email each time a new module comes out and things like that. But if you wanted to also connect it with another email platform like ActiveCampaign or ConvertKit or something like that, where you could then send an email if they haven't logged in for a while or if they haven't completed something. And those can be really helpful too, to make sure people actually consume the content and actually get the results that they want.
No, that's a good point, because I know it's easy to forget that you have this content, that you have this course. It's you get the shiny object syndrome, right? It just happens on a daily basis. So it's nice it's very helpful to get those types of emails, especially with new content that can go in. That's incredibly helpful. And so one of the things you talk about on LinkedIn and elsewhere is not simply with AccessAlly, but scaling, and business is scaling. And that's just a challenge in the business world. So as you've worked with businesses and in your own business, what are one or two common issues that prevent businesses from scaling?
Yeah, so I found that there's kind of what I would consider the two main areas that people get stuck when they're trying to scale. So first, I think everyone has a slightly different opinion or concept of what scaling is. So some people are like, I want to scale, but I don't want a big team. And some people are like, I just want to make more money, but like have more time away from my business. Some people are like, I'm fine to bring on team. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different opinions of what scaling looks like. But generally, it just means, making more money, but not necessarily putting in more time and effort as your business kind of grows. So I would say the two main areas that people usually need to work on is delivery. So whatever it is that you're delivering, whether it's a product, a service, a course, there's all different types of delivery models, and making sure that you're able to deliver without having that ceiling on that. So if you're in a service business and you're doing one-to-one work, you have limited hours. You can't deliver more than a certain number of hours per month, for example. And so finding ways to scale basically means uncoupling your delivery time and your delivery of your service from you and your time. So that could mean hiring people to help you deliver. So that's more agency style. It could be changing how you deliver. So maybe you do group work, maybe you productize certain parts of your services. You could also license your intellectual property. You can do courses, memberships. You can do all kinds of different ways of switching your business model. So for us, obviously software as a service is our delivery. So just figuring out like how can you deliver value that isn't necessarily tied to your time. So that would be one thing. And then the second one is the marketing side. So obviously you can be amazing if nobody knows about it. And if nobody, can come around and say, yes, I want this, then you're not going to scale. So I think this is where the marketing piece really comes in, and just being able to very, very clearly speak to your ideal people so they know that you're speaking to them, that you have something that will help them. And then just not being afraid to, shout it out from the rooftops and making sure people actually know where you are. And, when they're ready to work with you, that they can do that.
Yeah, that can be tough. At least, I guess sometimes it's really easy to say, okay, I'm selling this and as a business, I'm pushing this. Other times it feels like overkill and I'm just like, this is all I say. People must hate me. And so I appreciate that part of it too. But you're right. They won't buy if they don't know. So I appreciate, and I like how you describe scaling, trying to make more money essentially with less time. Did I paraphrase that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much. Like where you're
Okay.
kind of uncoupling the time and the money. Yes.
Uncoupling time from money. I like that's a much better way than I said it. So we'll go with that. I do like that though, because I think that frees you from that idea of I need more people, I need more whatever. So yeah, that's a very helpful definition.
And actually what you just mentioned is really important to me too, is the concept of what does enough look like. So I think all of us in business, we're like more like, I want to scale more, I want to grow more, I want to have more customers and more everything, right? And at the same time, if you don't have a version of what enough looks like, then you might end up in burnout territory. And that's where, you're doing a lot. You might be even doing things that aren't effective because you're so focused on getting to that bigger number. And someone, who has scaled to 7 figures and also have been kind of quote unquote stuck at 6 figures for a long time, I think that we think that the next level is going to be this magical thing, whereas it's really just more of the same. So if you're operating from a very burnt out place or from a lot of hustle, and that's not what you want, in the beginning, you kind of do have to work pretty hard to get things up and running, but there's a certain level where, pushing harder isn't necessarily going to make it grow. So this is where you need to kind of realign your values and kind of what's important to you and make sure that you're building the business that you enjoy, that is actually, heading in the direction you want it to head into. And just know that the money will come and that, that part is going to happen. It's just a matter of continuing to do the right actions and connect with the right people.
Sometimes we think bigger is better, but it's not. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just chasing the wrong goal, chasing the wrong outcome. And like, I know a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, you kind of shared your own business journey from like 2008 to 2023. You shared it in a single post. I thought it was a wonderful post. And so so everybody listening, I don't have the post in front of me, but the first line of it was slow but steady business growth. Here's my journey. So when you look up on her profile, when you look up on Nathalie's profile, go to that and you can read her journey, which I thought was was very encouraging to me, as somebody who has started and stopped and struggled. And so what did you learn through scaling your own business that surprised you, or maybe you just weren't expecting?
Yes. So some of the things that I learned through scaling my business was that I really have this need to change things up quite radically every like 18 months or so, which just sounds kind of interesting. But I think that's sort of the entrepreneurial kind of starting new things is more exciting than keeping existing things going. So definitely in the first, I would say 6 years of my business, I switched business models very often. So I did everything from, courses to web design to consulting to back to courses, back to memberships, then live events and more one-on-one and group work until I kind of settled into the software side of things. And that kind of gave me the stability that I was really looking for. And also that's around the time where I had my kids. So I kind of had to stop reinventing the wheel and just let what we've built, keep growing. And so I would say, yeah, if you are the type of person that tends to shift and, shiny object is not quite the right word, but it's sort of like a reinventing the wheel, even though something is already working, but you're like, no, I want to try something different and to see if it'll be better. So that tends to be something where I sort of self-sabotage a little bit. And so I would say just be careful if that is you. And before you start something new, make sure that you basically have a good bridge in between the two, right? So when we started our software company, there was not very many sales coming in at the beginning. I think we had 4 beta people who signed up for the software, and that's not going to be enough to cover the bills. So we had to keep all of the other services that I had until we were able to get the software up and running and making more money. So that would be kind of one thing I learned. And then the other thing also is that top line does not equal profit. So I think that's kind of obvious, but as we scaled, we did hire more people, and then we kind of realized, okay, we're paying ourselves a good salary. That's awesome, but there was not a whole lot left over at the end of the day. So we kind of had to reassess some of that too. So I would say, making sure that your eyes are open, your priorities are clear, and adding people is great. I love having full-time people on our team, but at the same time, if that's not what you like, if you don't like managing people or collaborating with people on your own team, don't build that kind of business.
No, and that's a very important distinction, that top line and bottom line are two very different numbers. The top line sounds really good, but it doesn't necessarily equate to actually what you take home. And I think sometimes we chase those numbers as like, oh, if I can hit 7, oh, if I can hit 8 figures. And it's like, yeah, but what is that quality of life that you want? What are those goals? What is it that makes you happy, but really provides that satisfaction? So, and it sounds like too, it's been a journey that you don't necessarily know at the beginning. And so you just start making those adjustments along the way. But the bridge sounds like that was important as you did so.
Absolutely. And one thing that I always like to kind of look at is like a lens that I call the spiral staircase. So a lot of times in our careers or our lives, we do something and then we kind of go forward, we move away from it, and then we almost like find ourselves back to square one, doing something very similar to what we used to do. But the difference is that we're kind of a level up because we have a lot more experience than when we first did it. So I kind of felt that way with web design. So I did web design when I was in high school, like building websites when I was very little. And when I found myself building websites in my business, I was like, oh, I'm doing the same thing. This doesn't feel like I moved forward. Like, what's going on? And I realized, no, actually, there's a lot more experience. Like, I actually know how to charge for my time. I know a lot more about business. I know a lot more about marketing. So I can actually help my clients do things better with their websites. And then it's the same thing with, designing our software. Once I was back in the software space, I had a lot more experience again with working with customers and, understanding what they want and what they need and how to communicate better with them. And so all those things kind of circle back and help you as you iterate in your business.
I like that spiral staircase illustration, that coming back around just at a higher level. I think that's very applicable to my journey as well. It's just, it comes back around. I move away, I come back, but I'm much farther along, much more skilled, or at least in the journey. So I really like that description. Let me ask, do you have any before and after stories that you'd like to share where somebody comes to AccessAlly, they say, okay, we're going to try you guys out, and like they implement, and on the other side, there's, just flower petals and, just sunshine and just wonderful. I would love to hear any stories you would like to share from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one client that comes to mind, Natasha Holland. So she and her partner, they were both working in corporate and they were kind of ready to step away and do their own thing, but they started off doing training in person. So they're in the UK, and so they would have, their market was local, so they would go to different companies and do this training, which is a visual training, visual communication. So, if you've ever seen when somebody is in a meeting and then someone's drawing as people talk, and then that kind of like visually communicates and kind of keeps a record of what people were talking about. So they do that kind of training. And so they had, their small market and it was going pretty well. And then they were like, okay, if we could do something online, like this would really open up, who we could train. And so they were on my email list for a while before they ended up signing up for AccessAlly. And they did. And they really wanted to do that team feature because they knew they were selling to corporations. So they started with their local people. And so they did sort of a hybrid. So they were doing like a live kind of kickstart call with everyone. And then people would go through the modules online, and then they would kind of meet again and make sure that everyone had a good, good experience with the whole thing. And what they realized was this was very scalable. And this is where they could actually finally take time off away from work and away from actually leading all these workshops all the time. And then when the pandemic started, they couldn't do any in-person training anymore. So this is where they were like, I'm so glad we already had this set up, because they were able to pivot. And their business actually grew during that time a lot. So I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that they're very happy, and they're saying like, this allows us to do what some of the bigger companies out there can do because we have this functionality. So they've been, very happy with with being kind of prepared in a way for switching to completely online.
Wow, that's a beautiful story of training, which, I know a lot of businesses do that in a variety of ways in person, but yeah, suddenly it's scalable if you can make a recording and offer that opportunity. It's not a one for one exchange. So I love that. Yeah. If you're listening and you do training or you do one-on-one sessions, that is an opportunity to really gain some time back as well as generate some more income. A couple of weeks ago, you had a conference. I read about it. I was excited to see that. What was the conference, and kind of what was the impetus and how'd it go? Because I know you had a good turnout.
Yeah, so the conference is called Scaling on Your Terms, and really it's kind of the culmination of a lot of the work I've been doing. I used to do live events. And so we used to put on this 3-day event and have people fly in and do the whole shebang. And it was amazing, just the connections with everyone and all of that. And I knew that I wanted to do something like that again. But at the same time, living on a farm, I'm not going to get away for 3 days and, be able to, have people fly in and all of that. So I wanted to do it virtual. And so I brought in some other guest speakers as well. And we really went over, what does it look like to scale the way that you want to scale? And what does that mean? What are some of the activities you can do to actually make that happen? And yeah, we really, really went deep, especially on what I call kind of the balance between, the services and the things that you're doing out in the world, and also your resources that support you in doing that. So whether that's, your health, your community, time, money, support, all of these things are important to be able to do things out in the world. And a lot of times we kind of forget that, and we're sort of giving from a place of, almost empty. So that we talked a lot about that, because I feel like people who are super ambitious can very easily burn out. And I feel like, especially over the past few years, people have been trying to do so much, but also not having the same resources as maybe we once had in terms of even just energy and like optimism and all of these things. It hasn't been as, high as in the past. So yeah, we talked a lot about that. And yeah, the turnout was really great. We had lots of awesome questions and participation, and it was definitely more workshop style to kind of get to each person and see what they're working on in their business as well. So yeah, it was great.
Excellent. The workshop sessions like that, it's amazing how much you can not only learn, but get accomplished and get feedback on. Those are tremendous. Are you looking to do it like again next year, or is this just sort of a one-off, or how's that?
Yes, so we already have the date. So August 15th, 2023 is one. So we'll be doing it again, and then probably doing it twice a year is what I'm thinking for now.
Okay, excellent. So twice a year. Say that again. It's August
15th, 2023.
August 15th. I'll drop that in the show notes too, so that if anybody's listening, they can refer back to that. I also know, Nathalie, that, from our conversations, you had a podcast in the past, and now you're getting ready to kick it back off again here in the near future. What's that podcast about? Because I'm always a big podcast fan. So, obviously, but what's it about? And yeah, just kind of give us the background about it.
Yeah. So I started a podcast, I want to say 2012, or maybe it was 2014. I don't remember, but quite a while ago. And it's called Off the Charts Business. And that was the same name as the events that we were doing. So Off the Charts Live were my live events, and then Off the Charts podcast was the podcast. And so I really always liked the name of it. And so we're just going to restart it. And what I'm realizing is that my definition of an off the charts business has changed. And so what I want people to think about is that they get to decide what an off the charts business looks like to them. So, when you think about your chart, you can put what you want at the top, or, when you go off the charts, right? So it could be money, it could be time off, it could be, time in nature or with your family or whatever it is, but your business can support whatever type of business or whatever type of life that you want to have. So that's where we're kind of restarting it, but giving it a slightly new spin, if that makes sense.
I love it. So that will be coming out later 2023?
Yes. We're starting to edit some episodes and just getting back into it a little bit.
Oh, I love it. So make sure, if you're listening, to check it out. Before we wrap up, any takeaways you would like to leave for the audience in terms of maybe an action item, an encouragement, anything that you would like to leave them with?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of times in business, we think that we need to have all of the answers ourselves, and we don't. So this is why we have amazing things like podcasts like these, or forums or communities or other places that we can go to connect with like-minded people who may be a little bit further ahead than us, or maybe have experience in specific aspects that we don't have as much experience in. And being willing to, be vulnerable and ask a question, even if it sounds like it's not a smart question, it's totally fine. And that's how you get ahead, and that's how you learn. So whether it's, financial stuff, business entity stuff, podcasting, marketing, scaling, tech stuff, there's never a stupid question. And I think that if we're willing to put ourselves out there and say, hey, I don't know very much about this, but I want to, that's how you can really get ahead and actually, reach the goals that you have for yourself. So I would say there's no shame and you can totally do it.
I appreciate that encouragement and that challenge. You won't know everything ahead of time, and just to learn as you go. I know that is absolutely true for me. And that's where I have gotten stuck in the past, is that analysis paralysis of just, I don't know what to do, therefore I do nothing. And that doesn't help anybody at all. So
and we've definitely all been there. So yeah, it's, and especially putting yourself in a room or a digital room with other entrepreneurs who maybe have been there and can say like, hey, here's what I do when I'm stuck. And, just things like that, they can really help move things forward again.
It does. Just getting that feedback and just, listening and taking notes, it can definitely move you farther along. So I appreciate that. As just kind of as we wrap up here, if listeners want to know more about you, more about AccessAlly, where would you like them to go?
Yes. So AccessAlly.com is the way to go and to find out more about the WordPress plugin and kind of what it can do for you. And like you said, we have comparison pages. So if you're not quite sure, we also do demo calls. So if you want to get on a call with someone on my team and just ask questions, you're more than welcome to book one of those. And then if you want to find out about my podcast and kind of what I'm up to, then NathalieLussier.com is where that is going to be. And yeah, you can find more information about our firm and all the cool things that we're doing there too.
Excellent. So AccessAlly.com and then NathalieLussier.com. Okay. Both of those are going to be in the show notes, to make sure you check it out. Find out about the podcast, the newsletter, just all of the the content that she is creating, her and her team, as well as get in on AccessAlly. It is a fantastic tool. So, Nathalie, this has been fun. I've just enjoyed the conversation. I've learned a ton from you, and I know the audience has as well.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. This was great. And yeah, I'm excited to hear what everyone thinks and what they're up to.
Make sure to sign up for the 200 at buildthatpodcast.com/the 200 and receive 200 words every Tuesday to move you forward with marketing and podcasting, delivered right to your inbox. Lastly, if you have questions or comments, you can find me on LinkedIn at Eric Rutherford, DM me on Twitter at rfordej, or email me at eric@straightforwardmg.com. Remember, use podcasts to grow your business and expand your influence.